Okay, you are listening to Healing That Sticks, changing the paradigm around health and healing. I'm Amina Mir, a medical intuitive and energy healer. And with me for the very rare occasion in real life is Chuck Crook, a therapist and life force attunement practitioner. And at this moment, when medical practices are both politicized and emotionally fraught, we think that energy medicine is the cure.
Indeed.
So what's interesting is I was listening to a bunch of other podcasts and studies about energy healing. And it seems that there are all these studies now being done by pretty reputable medical establishments showing the effects of energy healing on, let's say, pancreatic cancer or breast cancer. You know, there were the William Bengston stuff, things where they worked on mice. They gave them, they injected them with breast cancer cells. And then they found that when they used energy healing on the mice, that the mice recovered, which, you know, they had never seen before. And just now there's this new study in MD Anderson where they did a study with pancreatic cancer cells, and they worked with the cancer cells in a petri dish, also with mice, and they found that the energy healing also in that case basically reduced or greatly reduced the cancer cells. And what the two kind of interesting things about those was that neither of those nobody could use that. It was a placebo effect, right? Because neither mice nor cells in a petri dish are pretending that they're feeling something. So that was kind of an interesting breakthrough. And as I talk to people about what I do and about what you do, the thing that I found really interesting is one of the things that still baffles people is the idea of remote healing, like healing from a distance. And a lot of people don't understand how that could work. You know, again, people understand the idea of using one's own magnetic field to affect the magnetic field of another person in close proximity. But in terms of our understanding of the way in which energy healing works, a lot of people don't understand how, because I believe your magnetic field weakens or degrades over distances. So a lot of people don't understand how energy healing might work in, over a distance. Like, what is that process and how does it work?
Right. So, people were, when I told people I do the life force attunement, the meditation work over the phone, they're like, what? How does that work? I found that the beauty of the work is people can have their eyes closed. They can be in a comfortable place in their home. They're not getting in traffic. They're not doing all those things to make it a stressful thing to get healing energy work, vibrational medicine work. So they're very relaxed. They're very comfortable. And the remoteness factor, I initially was going from my teacher when I first was training, I would go up. I was living in New York and I would go up to the Upper West Side to his apartment. He would give me the session in the apartment. And then over time, I moved to California and all our trainings were no longer everybody from California or New York coming to one coast or the other and doing the trainings together. We started everything, 5-day retreats on the phone, and just, there was no fall off. There was no downside to it. And then of course, COVID hit. And I closed my office in Beverly Hills and started doing all my work, on the phone. And nobody wanted to come in after COVID. Everybody's just like, oh, this is great. I don't have to drive. I don't have to go to an office. This is perfect.
Right.
So there's been this change. Now, I never was doing the laying on of hands, body work on the table, that you're kind of referring to. You're talking about the magnetic piece. I'm assuming is of the putting the hand on and then you're penetrating their field.
Right.
But you left California as well and were no longer seeing people, and they were no longer in the room with you, no longer on a table. Now you're talking to people on the phone in India or wherever they may be. But I would be curious, the people that you treated in California on the table in the room, now that you're in New Orleans and they're still in California, how has that gone for them? How has that gone for you?
Well, it's interesting because I've worked on people doing remote healing, and similarly, I used to work in real life with people, but I worked with people on a table, on a massage table, and my energy work involved touching them, moving things around, moving energy around. And when I switched, partly I switched during COVID, but then I really switched when I moved here to not doing any table work and just doing distance work. Though even when I was in California, I worked a lot with people. Was already, like during COVID, I was already starting to work on the phone. So I worked a lot with people in India, with people in Europe, all over Europe, with people in, I guess Hungary would be considered Europe, or Serbia, or where else, all over Asia. And it was really interesting because I found that actually working remotely was more effective than working on the table, that people got more lasting and more profound results working completely remotely. And
Why do you think that is?
I feel like, well, it's interesting because I feel like we should talk about, there was a gentleman that I worked on in India who had prostate cancer, who you worked on as well. And I had been working on him there were a few people in India, but I had been working on him from the US on the phone. And then when I was in India, I actually was able to do a couple of sessions in real life with him. And I still feel like he got much better results from the remote work than he got from the physical space work.
So we've both been reading this, working with this book is kind of like our Bible. Yeah. And he's got chapters in here about remote healing and distance healing that we talked about last night. And he was talking about that electromagnetic field,
right,
and talking about the Kirlian photography, right, where they took a leaf and they cut the leaf in half, and then through that photography, the life force, the subtle energy body of the leaf still showed up, right, even though the top half of the leaf was now gone. So I'm kind of reading between the lines and not quoting him exactly, but what he's basically saying is this subtle body energy field is what you're working with. So you don't need, if you're tapping into that subtle energy body field, you don't need to be there with the leaf, to feel the rest of the leaf, right, that is still there after the cutaway. Right. So I assume it's the same thing with the person. You don't need them in the room if you're able to tap into the etheric body, the subtle energy body. And he's saying in here in the book, and he's kind of the I guess sort of the MD that believes that this subtle energy body work is where you can really make the biggest effect on illness and disease if you're treating it at that level, right, because he's saying that that's where it shows up before it shows up in the physical body.
Right. Well, so this gentleman who both of us worked on, who had prostate cancer, I felt like, one of the things that is believed about energy work is that things in your energetic field, let's say imbalances in your energetic field, whether those are from your physical existence, your physical experience in the world, in your life, or past lives, or whatever else you want to believe, emotional things, that those things affect your physical body little by little. And those things are so that, at least according to a lot of people, that illness starts in the energetic field before it comes into the density of the physical body. And so when you're working remotely, you are working with that kind of lightness of the energetic field versus a heaviness or the slowness or denseness of the physical body. And so changing the energy of the physical body through the energetic body is actually much faster and easier and more direct, at least in my experience, than working with that heavy physical form.
That's my experience, is that the beauty of working with the subtle energy body is you're communicating. The subtle energy body is doing the work in a way. Right. We're like, you and I are practitioners. We're vessels for the energy work to flow through, but we're not saying, hey, well, at least I'm not. I don't want to speak for you. I'm not saying, hey, today we're going to work on, this, your cancer, or today we're going to work on this injury that you have to your collarbone when you had a terrible auto accident. There's an agenda from the subtle energy body that is coming through the work. It's almost like you're turning the radio dial, and you're looking for, and this is me, I don't want to speak for you, but like a station that is clear is what we're doing. And if you turn the dial a little this way or a little dial that way, which happens kind of in a session when a client starts to say drift off, or some unconscious material comes up and they're no longer on that clear station dial, so I have to kind of bring them back a little bit. And if we stay in that frequency, then the work comes through and there's an agenda for the session. And at the end of the session, all the different bodies that are connected to the subtle energy body, the mental, the physical, the emotional, they're all getting the proper vibrational medicine that each one needs. That's how it comes through for me in my work with the clients.
Well, because when I work, I actually work on a specific thing. So let's say we talk about our friend who had prostate cancer, and he'd say to me, let's say we're doing a session and he's getting a treatment and he's having some side effect for the treatment. And I would specifically say, okay, this session, we're working on this side effect, that you're feeling nausea or exhaustion or pain in this thing, or digestive issues. But to your point, the thing that seems really interesting is that while we start out with that goal, that this is what we're working on, that's our way in to the issue, where we go through that process can quite often seem like things that are unrelated, right? So we're like, let's say he's feeling nausea, or he's having...
This is after chemo or radiation?
Perhaps, yeah. After chemo or radiation, let's say he's feeling nausea or he's feeling exhaustion. And I'll say, okay, well, we're going to work on your exhaustion, or we're going to work on your nausea. We would find that the body might show us like something that happened when he was 3 years old, or something that happened when, a belief that he maybe had, a limiting belief that he had, or some negative programming that he had, or something that, and all of those things might not necessarily be specifically related to the nausea. But when we went back and released all of these old things, the nausea would go away.
So the nausea was a symptom of what you released. Right. The nausea was not the thing that was causing him to feel sick, so to speak. Well, he felt sick because of the nausea, but that was a manifestation.
The nausea, like the way I always describe it is that you can have two people who are exposed to the same thing, and let's say most doctors will be able to, say that that's true. That two people can have chemo, and one person can have no nausea, and one person can have like terrible nausea and can't keep anything down. So, it's not necessarily the thing itself that causes the nausea, though it may be, but your own beliefs or stuff that's stuck in your body that makes your body react to something.
Right, because you think about the chemo and the radiation are like, that's a lot of toxicity for the body to handle. So on one level, feeling nauseous could be related to that toxicity
reaction
to cancer treatment. But then what you're saying is it's like peeling an onion. That's one layer of the nauseousness. There could be 4 other layers that are contributing to the nauseousness. So what you started out talking about is how the density of the physical body is so different from the very refined energy of the subtle bodies. And so the nauseousness is once you're in the session and you feel that nauseousness, you're in that density, right? So you go in the door of the density, like the patient, the client is going in the door of that nauseousness, of that heavy in the body feeling. But as you remove something, okay, that's one part of the nauseousness that's gone. Then the density's been sort of shifted around, and now it may not be as severe, but it's still there. And then an hour later, at the end of the session, it's completely gone.
Right.
And we're not aware, at least I'm not aware as a practitioner, as to you are more Claire, so you may get signals about what's being cleared. Right. I don't have any discussion with the client about what we're clearing. I don't know what we're clearing. He doesn't know what we're clearing, but he knows it's being cleared because he feels lighter. Right. He feels that he's got his life back, his life force back in his body, instead of sort of, all these podcasts, I keep talking about how people feel PTSD body, PTSD brain, where they're just numbed out. It's almost like the cancer treatment, like nukes your energy field. Right. And so we're putting it back into homeostasis. We're putting it back into an equilibrium where your body can actually detox and those things. So I kind of got a little bit off track of this particular patient. What else did you want to say about this?
Well, I'm curious to know. So when I worked with him, the thing that I found with the distance healing was that we were able to, using the distance healing and my understanding of how it works, because the funny thing is, there have been times where I've worked directly with doctors and nurses who have, let's say, a physical symptom and they don't know what to do, maybe headaches, migraines, whatever. And I've worked with them as a distance healer on the phone, no video or anything. And they'll say to me, I'm like, okay, what are you feeling now? How are you feeling? And they're like, this isn't supposed to work. Like, they get really kind of baffled by the whole thing. And they're like, yeah, my headache's gone, or the pain in my hip is gone, or the thing. And so it's an interesting thing, the way I personally feel, the reason I feel like distance healing works is the idea of quantum entanglement, is that we choose, and I feel like, and again, maybe it seems to me the way you work is quite similar. I feel like we actively entangle with their energy field, their let's say molecules or atoms, or the way in which that works. And so that our energy, even from a great distance, even if they are in a room in a Faraday cage where they might not be able to feel magnetic, our magnetic field, or might not be affected by our magnetic field, their cells are still responding in that kind of quantum entanglement way. And I feel like so I don't know exactly how it works, but I do know that it works the same way, whether somebody's in the room with me, not that I'm physically touching them, but somebody's in the room with me, or someone is in Hungary, or someone's in Czechoslovakia, and I'm in New Orleans, where I am right now. It doesn't seem to change the effects of the work on their body, or the energy on their body.
The other thing I concur with that, and what kind of blows my mind about distance healing, like for years, my dad got cancer, and, he'd never meditated in his life. He didn't know what meditation was, but he was stuck at home with nothing much he could do. And so I started this group, and I think I was living in San Francisco. I had a person in Florida, had a person in, my dad in North Carolina. There was like 5 or 6 of us on the call every week. And we did this for like 2 or 3 years. And it was what I found in the distance healing that kind of blew my mind was, there was a group dynamic. In other words, he had the cancer illness that he was, his healing was focused around, but it was like, I would go around the circle, so to speak, the virtual circle, because it's distance healing. And I would check in with each person. How's it going for you? And they would share a little bit about what's happening. And it'd be like, oh, I feel nauseous, or, oh, I've got this tightness in my chest, and we'd process that a little bit. I'd go to the next person. It's like, oh, I broke my collarbone on a biking accident in Switzerland, and it's like really painful. And we'd work with that a little bit. We went all around. And then at the end, it's like everybody felt like a relaxation response, you know, in the group sort of at about the same time. So it was like we were a healing circle. And even though everybody brought something completely different to the group, there's a group dynamic around this distance healing that
created coherence. And, you know, the particles that you're talking about with the quantum physics, there's something about the ability to communicate at that higher level. And he, again, in the book, Dr. Gerber's talking about that higher consciousness through the subtle bodies that's coming in, that frequency that's coming in of that level of healing. So everybody ended up getting what they needed that hour that nobody could have sat there and planned. You know, this is a very high level of consciousness that knows how to have 5 people in a group doing remote healing and everybody's issues individually, but collaboratively. You know, so I think like the future of distance healing for me, I mean, I know you and I went to like Joe Dispenza's retreats and things. I think almost like more people joining in remote healing is a window. Oh, you mean groups of people?
Groups of people
doing remote
and I know he does
together.
that. He has his trainees that are all over the world doing it.
Right. But so to me, like the future of energy healing is remote healing because, you know, as we found with our gentleman, so he had prostate cancer. I had worked with him. I'd started working with him when he had recovered from his first round of prostate cancer and his prostate cancer came back. And then the two of us started working together on him. And we noticed that there were certain places that kept coming up over and over again. But what I did notice was that his session that he had with you, which was totally remote, you guys have never met, barely even spoken.
WhatsApp
from India, right? Was so profound that I felt like even though I'd been working with him all along, there was this really big shift where you don't deal specifically with the issue or what's going on, where I'm dealing specifically with the issue. But he came back in such a different state after the session with you, where he was like, and again, he's from a distance and he felt completely moved. He felt like he had really refound, you know, it was, I think for him, such a difficult and painful thing to have his prostate cancer come back. He felt like he didn't trust his body anymore. He didn't like himself anymore. He didn't trust the medical system anymore. He was like, you know, I did all the things that they told me to do and my cancer came back. And he felt like he just didn't know what he was doing. Whereas after this session with you, he was like, oh, I actually believe that I can get well and now he is actually well again.
Isn't that the gift of this vibrational medicine, energy healing? Isn't that ultimately the gift that it brings across the board, no matter what illness we're treating? Is that we call it in the work that I do, we call it coming home to self. So it's really should be almost like coming home to higher self, because a lot of people, especially somebody as traumatized as you are with cancer, and depending on all these external, you know, forces to be your healing remedies, this medicine, this chemo, this particular doctor who's a cancer expert, you know, all these researched tests, I mean, all these research studies that have said, oh, if we do this amount of chemo, it's the right amount of chemo for you and all this stuff. But coming home to self is really the thing that makes you feel like you're alive in your recovery, is the connection within you that is that endures lifetimes, that endures different bodies you've inhabited, that endures anything you're struggling with, because it's never not been whole, complete, the same material as stars are made of. Like, it doesn't stop being that quantum level.
Right.
It doesn't stop existing at that quantum level even though you're not in touch with it, it's still there. It's almost like you're in a fog. You're in like a snowstorm when you're ill and you're not in touch with it anymore. It's a whiteout in a way. And you come out of that storm, you come out of that fog, and you rediscover that connection. You had it as a kid, but it's not just the illness. It's all the things that happen to one, going through life.
And in my understanding, like your goal is to, at least in energy healing, is to take us out of, as you described before, that hamster wheel of like constantly dealing with one symptom after the other, to a more holistic sense of yourself, your body, your thing. And if you're using that paradigm of health, which is reconnecting to your higher self, reconnecting to where you should be, then distance isn't a thing, right? Because we're all connected energetically.
You said such a profound thing to me about that yesterday. I was like, my mom is like 93, and I was like, she's got early Alzheimer's, and I called her up and she talked to me for like 1 minute, and then she like put the phone down, and the nurse was like, he's still on the phone. She's like, no, I'm going to have dinner. And I asked you, I was like, does she want to talk to her son? And you're like, why? She's talking to you all day long in consciousness. Like, she doesn't need to physically like have you on the phone to be in touch with you. Yeah. And I was like, oh, wow, I never thought that way. But that's a different paradigm.
Well, yeah, because we are, that's why I feel like, in my understanding, and I have not had the science to back it up. I don't know the studies. I haven't seen those, but my understanding of why remote energy healing or distance energy healing is so effective is that it starts from that idea that we are all one consciousness, and all of our cells and all of our energy we are all affecting each other. And that intention is the most powerful tool in activating our energy and making it do things, make it connect. It's almost like taking like your little radar gun, and your intention is like where you aim it, right? So the reason, and my understanding, the reason that remote energy healing works is because you focus your intention on another person, your energy on connecting into somebody else's energy field, working with their higher consciousness, helping reconnect. Because it's not, as a healer, and we talked about this before, actually we don't do any healing, right? It's the person's own body and their own consciousness that heals themselves, in the same way that doctors actually don't do any healing, right? You get a cut and maybe your doctor sews it up if they're that kind of doctor, but then your body has to heal it itself, has to make the scar. Or you get a broken arm, the doctor might put on a cast, but it's your own body that heals that broken arm. And similarly, as healers, we just hook the person back up to their power, their greater self, their higher self, so that they can do their own healing.
So today, around that topic, today we were talking, and you brought up that within that paradigm that we're talking about, healing that sticks, and one of the reasons we were saying maybe healing doesn't stick, because someone could have a really good session, 2 or 3 sessions with either of us or both of us, and then the healing doesn't stick. And you were saying, yeah, because they have to be accountable. Like, they can't just want us to continually have a session with us that feels really good, and they have, a better outcome for a couple of weeks. But if there's a paradigm shift within that person's illness, relationship to their illness, if they're not accountable to that, and they're just giving all their power over to you or me, right, that's not going to work. Right.
That doesn't work for remote energy healing or close-up healing or any kind of,
So it's like, if you
give away your powership or your ownership of your health, of your wellness state to anyone else, whether it's, a healer or a doctor or plant medicine or your partner or, ibogaine or ayahuasca or whatever, you therefore lose your agency and your connection to your higher self, because your higher self and yourself are the things that do the healing.
So, this topic of remote healing, and our client that we both worked on, and after I did the work, more integrative type work, you said he's come back as a new person. Can you say a little bit more about how we take that worked with him in terms of remote healing, and how does that play out going forward?
Well, the thing that I thought was really interesting is, his cancer came back, and it had spread, but we doing our remote work, while he did do the standard allopathic treatment. He's now completely, with no evidence of disease. He's really happy in his body. And where I think that our work really helped him, and it was pretty much all remote, really helped him was with that resilience, so that he had a standard treatment that was pretty big and pretty debilitating. And he now still feels like himself and is able to do a lot of things that people who've had prostate cancer treatments are not able to do. And I think that support of the remote energy healing made a huge difference.
So you're saying that because you coached him from the get-go, he trusted you, and you coached him about the allopathic treatments he was getting, and as well as the remote vibrational medicine work that we were doing. So you were coaching him through that, and then he was making a decision if he wanted to stick with the allopathic or not. And how did you all come to that decision? How did he come to that decision to continue the allopathic and the vibrational remote together?
Well, the thing that's sort of interesting, I feel like, and, is always like my belief around healing anyway, is that allopathic medicine, in the way in which it's practiced, uses a lot of fear-based stuff. And they're like, if you don't do this, like even when I had cancer, they're like, if you don't do the chemo, you're going to be dead in 12 weeks. And I feel like you have to trust your own inner knowing about what's going on and how you are going to feel well. And he was in a lot of a state of fear. And I do feel like in the case of his treatment, I feel like the treatment was probably excessive, because I feel like a lot of times they'll give chemo or they'll do radiation and they'll say it's prophylactic in a sense, like that, to make sure that the cancer doesn't come back. Which I felt like my understanding of both chemo and radiation is there's no such thing as prophylactic chemo or prophylactic radiation. That's another whole story. But I feel like his body was better able to withstand those very heavy doses that they gave him, that they continually gave him, because he was doing the energy medicine at the same time.
Makes a lot of sense.
So he wouldn't have the same side effects or the same long-term effects.
So it's almost like you're detoxing him after, like the detox work, the energy vibrational medicine. Same thing with my dad, like detoxing after he had those. So it's like the allopathic medicine could do the work that it needed to do. And then with the vibrational, you like detox what the body wants to get rid of after the chemo and the radiation. And that sort of sets them up for another round in a more healthy state, perhaps.
Yeah. And it also helps him, now that he's all finished with his treatment and going back to his life, it helps him be living in his life.
Huge.
Yeah.
Huge. No amount of, there's really nothing you can do that's more important than having a life while you're going through that, except coming out of all of that and really having your next step of your life be cancer free. I mean, again, one size doesn't fit all. But in his case, that was a great decision to do the allopathic and the vibrational complementary treatments. And how long did this go on? How long was he in this treatment process?
Let's see, I'm trying to remember. I am guessing it was a few months, maybe 3 or 4 months.
And how do you remember, like, if he was getting the chemo and the radiation, how many days after that would he have the vibrational energy medicine work with
So
you?
we'd often do a session before the chemo and then a session afterwards.
Okay, I love that because that's the whole reason we're doing this podcast. You're bringing it back home to the original idea, which was instead of putting the chemo and the allopathic first,
Right.
start with the vibrational, get your body in a place where you're even more as healthy as you can be, as resilient as you can be going into the allopathic treatment.
Right. And then to help you detox. And as you said, using remote healing, which you did with your dad, you were able to help him detox. Like he could taste the medication in his mouth doing meditation that's on the phone. Right. So without giving him any physical treatment, he wasn't in, or any physical catalyst, he was able to detox his body purely energetically.
Right. Well,
using
in the
remote
session, do you taste that? Do you have that taste of metal in your mouth? And he'd be like, yeah, what is, I was like, that's the medicine. That's the chemo and radiation. That's what we're detoxing.
Right. That's your body releasing it naturally.
Releasing it. And then sort of the saliva. I mean, it's amazing the fine level that the energy vibrational medicine can take you down to. So by the end of the session, his saliva would be clean. Like he'd be like, I feel this like I've been like I went through an internal car wash. Right. You know, I got a bottle brushing.
Right. Without a colonic.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No coffee enema here. I mean, nothing wrong with that, but not needed.
Yeah.